here's the challenging part is like, I think a lot of the narrative is like, we need to shift production to the United States. And I fully support that, but we also need to understand there's some things in the United States that are never going to be made here. You know what I mean? That like plastic garbage can that you get at Walmart for $9, that it's the shitty plastic, you know, that you put in your bathroom, that will never be $9 if it's in the United States. Yeah, you're going to need to be willing to pay $40 for that little piece of.
Is that just labor?
Well, I think there's no, yeah, probably, right? There's just no, system, yeah, right? There's no way to compete. So in addition to that, if I'm an American company, I'm a little hesitant to shift to an American factory, particularly if you have to like assemble like a line and get all the tooling and stuff, because guess what? If the Democrats win in the next election, they might undo all of this, right? And then you've shifted everything, and now you have super expensive production in the United States. You know, hell yeah, you're made in the USA, but now you're once again not able to compete, because if it's one of these cheaper goods, you're getting undercut by 3x, you know what I mean, overseas. And the people that are selling similar goods in your space, it's impossible to win. You know what I mean? Particularly for goods that like there's not really a brand association. Like you don't really care what your garbage can brand is, right? There might be some cases where your brand is so strong enough that you can be 3x the price and it'll work. But we know how much work that takes to develop that over time, right? And you have to be, you know, very good at that, in creating the ethos and the stuff that means more to the consumer than just the product. You know, what's associated with it matters to them too, and they're willing to pay for it. So to me, that's the kind of, you know, the one question I would throw back at this is like, everyone's beating the drum, made in the USA, but guys, that's going to take years. You know what I mean? You can't just start a factory overnight. I mean, we're trying to build a warehouse down the street. I bought that land in September of 2022. We haven't even, there's not been one bulldozer that's moved an ounce of dirt over there yet, right? So to think that, oh, by fall, there's going to be all these booming factories in the United States with high wages, it's just not going to happen. However, what's exciting is it's putting pressure on these big companies to invest in these factories. So, you know, maybe Honda comes in and they build a $400 million facility in Nebraska, right? And now some little town is now a town of 40,000 people, and everyone's making a really good wage because they realize, all right, with this tariff now, we have to do our own. So you see what I'm saying? So I think that the big brands, you know, we even talked about, you know, Apple CEO met with Trump, and they're working out I think it was like something like 500 billion or something. I mean, just absolutely massive. So that's what people don't realize is he is still wheeling and dealing, and it does give him incredible leverage. Hey, Apple, you can get a fast track approval for this if you invest in America. You know what I mean? And again, then the downstream positive effects on that for the American worker, and then of course the American consumer is huge, because then you have a bunch of people with a higher disposable income. So then they go out to eat more, they're going to concerts more, they're buying more clothes. It's a flywheel, right? And that's how we go on a market run, and everyone's, you know, kind of flourishing. So that's the long game. But I think we need to acknowledge that it's not going to be like we're going to get to some state where everything's made in the United States, unless it's getting subsidized by things like no income tax. Then I might be more willing to pay $40 for a molded plastic garbage can that would have been $9.
Yeah, it feels, as somebody who is certainly not an economist, it feels like there needs to be a healthy balance, or like in the sense that globalization is actually really good for everyone. And it relates to what you just said, like the idealistic viewpoint that we should just be self-sustaining and make everything here and buy everything here. That actually doesn't play out when you weigh the advantages of having a global market. And that's why, like, I think the reset though is that not being overly dependent on that global market. And it feels like, just as almost intuitively, is that we maybe were that. Like, we had become too reliant on externals, and then kind of rebalancing that, but not striving to an idealistic state of like, yeah, manufacturing has to be here in the US. But it's like, where is that balance of having having your citizens have access to a global market, which gives them advantages with the money they have to spend as far as their lifestyle, being able to buy a $9 garbage can as opposed to the $40 one, but then also having the infrastructure to support jobs and to support kind of the health of your own country. So yeah, no question banked within that, but that's just or baked within that. That's where my head goes as we're discussing it. As with most things, there's got to be like a balance point with this to allow an equilibrium to exist within the system.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, like, you just have to have a little bit of trust and faith that Trump knows what he's doing. Like, is he a little bit of a maniac sometimes? Yes. Does he say some ridiculous shit? Yes, he does. But the dude, and when it comes to business and the art of the deal, he knows what he's doing. And you can already kind of see it, I think, really coming together because, like we talked about, Vietnam's going to make a deal. Cambodia's going to make a deal. These other countries are going to start making deals, and China's going to go, oh boy, now there's an easy alternative to all of these production, options for these countries that, if it's a reciprocal 10% tariff or maybe it's no tariff, you know what I mean? Imagine what that'll do overnight. The Nikes, the Adidas, like they're all going to shift there. And China, especially if they need to maintain their image and whatever you want to call it, save face, and they want to hold at 145%. Okay, good luck, because everyone's going to leave, right? They really are. And it might take a year, but it just, if the math doesn't work, you can't continue. And the market efficiencies will naturally work out. And I just think it's a way for the country to get additional revenue that can be used for all kinds of things. And you pair that then with cutting a bunch of waste. Hey, there might be the first year in history we don't have a spend into the deficit more. Like, how wild would that be? Even if it's only like $1 trillion, we go from 30 to 29. People are like, oh, big deal. It's like, well, hey, that's a step. You know what I mean? For sure. And I think like, in the Bush years, like I remember it being like, again, this is a complete guess, but like, it was like 5 or 6 trillion. And then it just, of course, the war in Iraq, and then like Obama took over, and then it just kept getting bigger. And then even I think with Trump won, it continued, you know what I mean? And then Bidenomics, the $1 trillion spending bill that he thought he was FDR all of a sudden, and led to unreal inflation because he overplayed his hand and thought he was this world-class economist all of a sudden. You know what I mean? In $1 trillion spending bill. Like, are you kidding me? Right? On all this crap that, never, you remember some of the stuff that was in that bill? Absolutely insane. And look what happened. Of course, that's what happened, because you just printed all this money, and of course now it devalues the dollar and everything is more expensive now. And that sucks for, that middle class person, because their salary might not jump from 50 to 65 grand that year. They might go from 50 to 52, if that, right? And now that their dollar does not what it did before, and they're going to the grocery store. I noticed it really at the grocery store first. I'd stop in there after work with Ren just to get like a few things. And, I try to buy fruit every couple of days, so I'm not like buying fruit for the whole week, because it just kind of gets bad. And it's $160. And I'm like, I came in here for 4 things, right? And specifically bacon. You get the Wright's bacon I get now is like $13.99. That used to be $7.99, right? So all these things started happening. And for me, I'm fortunate that it doesn't affect me in any way. I've gotten to the point, like, you know what I mean? But for the average American, that's a significant change. Significant. And all that does is, okay, now they can't go spend that movie on that, that money on that movie night with the kids. Now they can't go out to eat. Now they can't go to that concert. And that obviously makes just business overall start to decline, right? And then businesses aren't as profitable. They can't give raises. They can't hire more people. And again, it's the flywheel in the other direction.